and welcome to Tokenverse podcast series, where we interview the most influential and inspiring minds to discuss the potential and future of Web3 technologies in the most disruptive fields such as the world of arts, gaming, governance, and economics. This production is brought to you by Doing Good, a novel NFT marketplace empowering creators and catering to the new generation of people who are caring not just about the most cutting-edge solutions, but also social impact. My name is Ania Poullain-Majchrzak, and I'm a journalist and film producer. And today's guest is Faris Oweis, who's the founder of Instigation Protocol. He's also an advisor and investor in several Web3 startups with particular focus on NFT infrastructure, DeFi, and data economy solutions, but also he's a founder of Crypto Coach. And I'm sure he's going to tell us a little bit more about all these projects. But I also have to mention that when he's not obsessing over NFT drops, Faris loves Austin, his wife, and Aussie Shepherd, coffee shop merchandise, and most recently pickleball. So we've got lots to discuss, and you're a man who's wearing many hats, Faris. And my first question to you is going to be like, what on your journey to where you became now? What were the most important turning points?
Yeah, so A, thanks for having me. And B, yeah, I think there's like a few kind of critical turning points. So one was kind of when I was in the Web2 space. And I was basically, my job was to secure and win like massive like infrastructure projects in the Middle East. I'm talking like new cities, transport systems, like bridges, like massive, like billion-dollar things. And I just basically wasn't that happy. So like we were winning these big things and like all these engineers, because it's largely like civil engineers, just over the like through the roof, like full of joy. And I was like just depressed. Like I just like, oh, what's going on here? So like, you know, just wasn't fulfilling, even though there's like, you know, success happening, right? So the turning point for me there was like, you know, you could be on the outside. So people were looking at me like, oh man, this guy's life is amazing. He's like jet setting Dubai, all this stuff. But ultimately, you know, you don't know what people are thinking. You don't know how people are feeling in any given moment. So you shouldn't just assume things. You shouldn't assume things are going bad for them. And you shouldn't assume things are going well for them. They're just having their own experience. So I think that's a lot of the time, for example, on social media, you could have like someone that could have a million followers, but they could feel alone, right? So that's like kind of a big learning I took away from that. And then the second turning point was when I initially got into the blockchain space. I was working on this project that basically incentivized people to transact peer-to-peer and directly with local merchants. And then we sold that as a SaaS product to municipalities. And without getting into the weeds of that product, the turning point for me in that was that it enabled me to talk to all layers of society. So I literally got to speak with like mayors, sometimes like ministers on a government level, to, you know, high-powered, executives at banks, to, co-op founders, to cupcake shop owners, to all walks of life. And the learning from that is they all were seeking the same kind of thing as it related to what they're trying to achieve on a community level, but they all needed to be spoken to in a different way. So the framing of what was happening needed to be different each time. So to me, the turning point there is that, you know, there's words can unify people, but complexity can divide us. Unknowingly sometimes. Or unintentionally rather. So I always kind of carry these things forward with me in everything I do in life to this day. I'd say, so those for me those are turning points.
Fantastic. And all these experiences and amazing meetings with people brought you to where you are now, and you've got your fingers in so many pies. I was wondering if you could just tell us perhaps maybe your 3 projects that you're most proud of, or how many you want really.
Yeah, I mean, with Instigation Protocol, right? So we're doing go-to-market and business development for these early stage solutions, right? So a lot of it is finding product market fit. A lot of it is, you know, trying to grow community, learn how the product is landing with them, what needs to be adjusted, and then hopefully then, you know, enabling growth from that point, right?
And what are your clients?
Yeah. So right now, for example, like Kudos, which is a decentralized compute solution. So you know, myself and others obviously see decentralized compute as a kind of a critical piece or critical pillar of, of any metaverse that gets created, underpinning the NFT infrastructure that in the future that I think many in the community want to achieve. You're going to need decentralized compute. You're going to need decentralized storage. You're going to need self-sovereign identity and portable reputation, for example, to go from game to game. So Kudos, I think, represents a really powerful enabler of the growth of the NFT community and what's trying to be achieved. So I'm really excited about Kudos and where it's at. So we're starting up the foundation side, getting the grant program going, spinning up the launch pad, and essentially trying to attract different technologies and different solutions that will enable this open metaverse that will be reliant on a decentralized compute stack that underpins it. So I'm super excited about that one. Yeah, it's cool. It's cool. Also got another project. It's an NFT collection called Metavice. So I can't say too much about it, but the reason I love it is because it's attracting so many cool people. Like there's something to be said around whatever you do, just work with cool people. And damn, these people attract so many cool people, from like ex-Marvel to people that worked on, I can't name, but like very now famous games that people, millions and millions of people use every day. And now they're looking to see, okay, how can I apply these game mechanics with a token economic strategy to, create the next big wave, right? So it's attracting a lot of people, and it's interesting to get so many domain experts and super intelligent people and super creative people in one place, and trying to make that work with a token and a community growth strategy, and partnering with other communities in the process. So I see that as a very interesting play. And then the third,
case, because there's, as you're saying, there's already community in place, but at the same time, you're saying you cannot say too much about it. So how does it happen? I'm sure the people listening to this would like to know.
Yeah, so I mean, the thing there is that different plans are in the works, right? And these people want to create a sustainable game and a sustainable game economy, because the goal is that users start using the game and they form their own little economies within the game, right? So that takes a lot of like deep thinking, a lot of critical thinking, a lot of architectural thinking. And basically what we're trying to do is attract, okay, where in the NFT space are the biggest like sci-fi fans? Where are the biggest, people that are interested in, GameFi, for example, right? So it's finding those types of communities and seeing kind of what collaborative framework we can create with them. From both two perspectives, one a top down, also a bottom up. So for example, with like, let's just say it was Bored Apes, the kind of the go-to-market strategy there would be like, okay, you can work with 11 Labs, for example, you can create something on that level, or you just meet a bunch of apes in the world and be like, yo, let's do something fun and let's bring each other into one another's community. And sometimes that has a bit of a plan, but you got to be somewhat open-minded to where the creativity can take you, and figure out where the overlay for collaboration is.
So when will we be able to hear more about this project?
Yeah, a couple months. It should be coming out. So I will be sure to revisit that with you then. 100%.
Metavice, nothing to do with Vice, the publication.
No, nothing to do with Vice, the publication. It's called Meta. Yeah, it's called Metavice. And the last one is more interesting in the sense for like DeFi specific. So it's called Apricot from the Solana ecosystem. And basically it's a borrow, lend, and farming solution. But the cool thing about it is Apricot Assist. So if you've ever, I don't know if you do any kind of like farming in the crypto space, but it's pretty nerve-wracking, particularly when you sleep. You don't necessarily want to keep that thing running. So Apricot Assist lets you create parameters and risk profiles, so it can basically deleverage you if some event happens with the underlying token that you deposit. So the whole goal of it is to create peace of mind and essentially reduce the probability of impermanent loss. So it's basically allowing people to experience the gains that happen with farming, but at the same time, not trying to essentially reduce the anxiety that happens by leaving it in place while essentially you're asleep.
Oh, wow. Fantastic.
Yeah,
so those are
there's
very
just a few
projects.
Yeah, they're fun.
And also tell us about the crypto coach.
Yeah, so that started out, it's interesting how that started out actually. So I kind of like, I'm sure you have this experience too. A lot of your friends that aren't crypto native maybe come to you like, what are you doing with Doing Good? And what are you doing over here? And, and they're just genuinely interested, right? And what I found is that people had two forms of interest. They had interest in making money, like, okay, what should I buy? What should I trade? But then also there's a subset of people that were interested in like, how do I kind of do what you're doing? Not necessarily what you exactly do, but how do I start like not doing my job, but like doing a job in the world that you experience, right? So people had a genuine interest. And then sometimes the people that came to me for like trading advice, they got into it and, it's a bull market. So obviously they did pretty well. They're like, this isn't enough. It wasn't fulfilling enough. They're like, I invested, like, for example, like you have people that like bought, like, for example, let's say Chainlink, right? So they have Link, right? And all of a sudden by buying something, right? You're researching it, you're in the community, you're on their Twitter, you're all this. Eventually people that were interested that bought it were like, how do I work for Chainlink? Right? So there's a bit of, so either they go direct to, I want to work, or they go to trading and then they want to work. Right. And I found that, people, when I try to help people just casually, just in my free time, man, the impact, if you want to feel impact, there is nothing that you will feel quite like alleviating someone's anxiety. Be like, okay, I know how to do this now. This is who I talk to. Here's how I frame it. Here's, and they're on a path and they get a job. And they are so appreciative in that moment. So what I decided to do, okay, let's make this a more formal thing. It seems like, damn, if I'm getting like a ton of inbound, not interest, that's not the word. Yeah, okay, ton of inbound interest or curiosity or questions, there must be so many people in the crypto space getting the same exact thing, right? And I think what happens on Twitter is like there's a lot of people that have ad hoc support. So what we decided to do was create like a formal program. And so what I did is I partnered with a crypto recruiter and we created a cohort-based program. So I meet with people one-on-one, but also we created a cohort program to essentially help Web2 people transition careers into Web3. And the main thing with that, there's a couple kind of, everyone's a bit different, right? But a couple commonalities that people share is one, they have a navigation issue. So they know they want to work in the crypto space or a specific subset of the crypto space, let's say it's DeFi, but it's so vast and it can be so confusing. They don't necessarily know where they would fit. Even though they know who they are, they just don't know where they would fit. So they have a navigational issue. And the second thing is they have a knowledge issue. They simply don't speak the lingo, like at all, right? So there's a bit of a vocab situation there. So we help them basically navigate these two areas and have basically create a fit with not just what they're looking for, but where they would be a fit. So typically they come in saying, well, I'm finance, so I want to work in DeFi and this, that. But there's so many granular questions you need to ask, right? So even for you and me, for example, like we work with certain groups. So we can be, for example, in marketing, and maybe we want to be more geared towards marketing towards developers, or maybe when we want to market more towards community, or maybe we want to market towards other partners in the crypto space. So you would literally wake up in the morning and you're like, do you want to speak with developers who think like this, who need that? Do you want to work with community, which is like, it can be overwhelming at times, right? And you're trying to like, catch the signal within the noise and frame value to the community, or you're trying to frame value to different partners in the crypto space and figure out where the win-wins are. So sometimes they need to basically be taken through these exercises to figure out who do I want to speak with and who do I want to spend my time with every day once I'm actually in the crypto space. So basically that's more of a vibe situation. So it's basically just helping them harmonize vibe and vocab and getting them from point A to point Z.
Fantastic. And the people who are coming to you to do this program or be coached by you, are they from kind of expected professions, or do you have somebody who is completely coming from somewhere you would not think they would be interested in these technologies, like, I don't know, gardeners or something?
It's so funny you say that. So my neighbor's neighbor is an older woman. She passed away, and then the son came, and I'm like, I'm sorry, sorry for what happened and all that. And we got talking, and he's a barber, right? So they have an Airstream in their driveway. I'm like, oh man, that's a sick Airstream. I want that Airstream so bad. He's like, oh, you can't have it. That's my barber shop. I'm like, what? So we're in this barber shop now. We're in this Airstream, which is pretty popular in Austin. And he was just really genuinely interested in figuring out how to get more in the space, right? Like, now he already invested, he had a Coinbase and all that. But so that's just a barber that I just casually met in a driveway, and then an Airstream that turned out to be a barber shop, right? At the same time, you have, executive level bankers that are figuring out, okay, where do I fit in the space? What do I want to do, right? So the way I've been exposed to it, I think you have multiple levels of like where they are at in their career that are interested. And then you have multiple levels in terms of like seniority that are interested. And the most interesting part is that some of them want to take a linear route. So I'm an investment banker. I want to go into DeFi, and I likely want to work at Circle because it kind of feels like a corporation and there's not too much of a culture shift. Versus I'm in banking, but I freaking hate banking. I want to like shut this whole system down, like let's do this, kind of thing. And they just want to like do whatever the opposite of that is, right? So at least where I'm sitting / standing, I'm seeing all walks of life. I'm seeing all levels of experience, and I'm seeing all levels of paths that want to be taken, which I find is super cool.
Fantastic. And before we go to the next question, I just wanted to give all the participants the information of like, if they want to take part in this program, where do they go? Where do they find information about it?
Yeah, no problem. So cryptocoach.career, cryptocareer.coach. You can find me there. It's Twitter. I switched. I used to do a lot of messaging on LinkedIn, but now I do more DMing on Twitter. So Faris_says. And then I can provide you those links after, no problem.
Fantastic. And it's interesting that you're talking about, a guy who was a barber becoming someone who wants to work in Web3 technologies. And knowing our audience, I know that, like they're already educated, they know about the benefits of Web3 technologies. But I wonder, what do you think about taking, this knowledge to the wider audience in order to achieve this, mass adoption? Do you think that what do you think could be done for this?
What can be done in terms of like transitioning into Web3, or when you do when you get there?
For people to know about it, because obviously you're doing great work for kind of educating the people and getting, people, enlightened about it, but it's still kind of like, for example, I know this podcast I hope is going to reach as many people as possible, but usually people who come to hear about things we talk about here, it's they already know about Web3 technologies, blockchain, and so on. And that's why I'm asking what I would like to brainstorm. How can we reach this wider audience?
So I'll give the advice I give myself, right? And then you probably give yourself this in some form or fashion every day. I'm just constantly curious. So for example, like LinksDAO, I think now last week, right? So LinksDAO, they did their thing, they raised their money, they're doing what they're trying to achieve with golf courses and all that. But what gets unseen there are all the mini network effects that get created, right? So when you start joining there's two things that would happen when you start joining these DAOs, right? Two primary things. One, which is what most people find the most amount of value in, which is you're discovering things that just aren't right. You're discovering things that aren't quite there yet. You're discovering user experiences that don't meet your expectations. You're discovering product functionality that doesn't meet your expectations. And these are the things that people want. You don't want to be bringing the same ideas someone else is bringing, right? Yeah. You want to be bringing ideas that don't exist yet. They don't exist yet because you're on the ground and everyone's up here, right? And your job to provide more value is to find things on the ground. And come with your skill sets and your talent, which are two different things. Skills and talent are two different things, right? Talent is who you are. Skills are what you can pick up and what you've picked up so far. But if you're on the ground, utilizing your talent and your skill, and you're uncovering things that maybe either people A, don't see, or B, see, but haven't been able to elevate, that's bringing additional value in ways that other people aren't, right? So that's number one. And then two, you create your own conversations. And I'll give you my own personal example. So LinksDAO, I got pretty inspired by it. I'm like, damn, that's super cool. Damn, like everybody is like in on this and super excited. Because like over Christmas, I was like researching golf courses. I'm like, what is it? Like, how much does it actually cost to run a golf course? Like, I'm Googling it. I'm like, man, this is expensive. And then I'm like looking at some golf courses, like who's selling, who's not, who owns this one. So I was looking up a golf course in Florida, some biotech entrepreneur owns it. And like, I just got like tunnel vision, right? And then it happened, right? The DAO launched and it's doing its thing. But then what did I do? I'm having conversations with people about it. And then we're trying to apply the premise of what LinksDAO did in our own personal environment, our own community together. So I've been working with people on like a pickleball DAO, right? And I know you mentioned it earlier. Are you familiar with pickleball?
No, I think you should explain us what pickleball is.
Oh man, get ready. Okay, so pickleball. So, hey, how was pickleball born? Pickleball was born because like some super rich people in the Hamptons, their kids didn't want to play tennis anymore, so they had to figure out a way to make tennis more interesting for them. If you're not familiar with the Hamptons, it's like an hour outside New York City, and it's like where a lot of wealthy Wall Street people own like a lot of big ass mansions. So they created this sport, and essentially it's like a quarter the size of a tennis court, and you play 2 versus 2, and it has a bunch of rules I won't get into, but essentially it's really fun. It's really fast paced. And you play with 2 paddle. Each person plays with a paddle, and there's different rules of when you can hit the ball, when you can't hit the ball, when it has to bounce, not bounce in this more confined space relative to a tennis court. And it has a culture around it that's more easygoing than tennis. It's more inclusive than tennis in the sense that like you don't have to like pay $1 million for the court and all that. So we're like, okay, how do we? But yeah, and it's the fastest growing sport in America, by the way.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Do you
like, but
use
there's
tennis
no like.
courts and tennis rackets?
You use pickleball
Okay.
rackets, paddles. You use pickleball paddles, and you could reconfigure a tennis court and draw your own lines. Yes, but
Okay.
but in Austin, at least, in many other cities around the country, there are pickleball courts which we use. But you could do a hybrid thing where you create your own within one if you wanted to.
I must try. So I'm in London and I'm very into tennis, but that sounds like something I would be happy to try.
I'm into tennis too still, but like we're definitely pickleballers. So we're like, how do we create a pickleball DAO together? How do we like do what they did? How do we? There's no like destination for pickleball anywhere in the country, but there's a massive emerging interest. So we're just getting together as a community. We're figuring it out. It's like, okay, where would we be? Where would we buy land? Like, how do we like do what country clubs did for golf, but like make it for everybody? Like we're just having these conversations. So. And these are people that aren't in the crypto space and people that are in the crypto space. Non-crypto space people are getting involved, and people like have raised millions in crypto for their own companies are also equally involved with equal participation and equal enthusiasm. So now these people are just naturally part of it. So that's my advice. Get lost in something and then find your way with it and apply it in a way that makes sense for you and attract others. And then inevitably you'll find tribes, you'll find communities, and those communities will have, oh, you're looking to get in Web3? Like, oh, I have this company. You should work. We need a social media manager. Or you should talk to my friend. They're looking for a new CMO. I would love to recommend you. And because ultimately, it's all based on relationships. If people vibe with you, they'll trust that you'll vibe with their people. And then they'll trust that, yes, you have the skills, and yes, you have the talent, and you'll figure it out, right? And because people have that trust when they know that they can start a working relationship with you. It's just, so if I can work with you, that means people I know and trust will also be able to. And that's how we engender trust with one another. And that's how you likely get a job quicker.
Very good. I'm just thinking, because of course the community of the Web3 is growing and more people are into blockchain. How do we make sure that this technology will stay faithful to its original foundations and will not be corrupted like, in the past other great inventions?
Yeah, so I think these innovations kind of go in cycles, right? So, with the NFT, let's just take the NFT aspect of it, right? So I think there's various NFT, communities out there, right? But ultimately, I've been a bit disenfranchised with many of them, in the sense that you have a lot of speculative people that coordinate different actions on Discords. They sweep floors, they augment the price, and then they dump it, right? So they 3x, they 5x. But the problem with that is, right, when they do that, there's other people involved and those other people are the ones that buy it at that price and then are stuck with it.
Yeah.
These are people that don't have 0.5 ETH to throw around, 0.2 ETH to throw around. These are people that only had 0.2 and 0.5 ETH to throw around. So they're not on the inside. So the reason I welcome these cycles is because it weeds out a lot of these people. So if you look at like DeFi, for example, I remember Vitalik at an ETH Denver conference one time. I forget what year, but it must have been after the first bull cycle, because he said like, I'm very happy for everyone who is here. I'm very happy for everyone who stuck around, right? So what that means is when you have cycles, and when that cycle is done, it weeds out the people that weren't there for the right reasons, right? So I think we need a few of these cycles to weed it out. So I think 80%, not 80%, but like a large, massive amount of people that just recently came into the space, let's say a year and a half ago, largely as traders, and then have, permeated through other aspects of the blockchain ecosystem, but won't be here when the gains and the returns aren't as advantageous. So I think it's to answer your question, I think it's about having a really true memory of who does what for what reason. the intentionality of different communities. And I
Mm.
think you're seeing that today, different communities that were there in the beginning that have grown organically, over the years. And it's because they've stayed true to a particular mission and certain ideals, sometimes at the expense of other things the community wanted, but
Mhm.
they stuck it out and the community stuck it out with them. So I
Mhm.
think it's about, finding those intentional communities and galvanizing around what they're building. And that
Mhm.
could be offering your talent, that could be offering your time, that could be offering capital, that could be, whatever your, the type of energy that you want to kind of commit to a different community to see it thrive and grow.
Yeah. And so, how would you advise potential investors, collectors, to look out for these bodies in the NFT ecosystem?
Yeah, usually when people, well, number one, when people like, when you're introduced or talking with somebody about these kind of topics and their first kind of like lens that they talk about it through is money, they're the wrong people
Hmm.
right off the bat. They're
Hmm.
out.
Hmm.
So, because basically they're looking at it from like an ROI perspective and a multiplier perspective, right? So, for example, you could have the best project in the world, but if it only 2x and not 10x, it would be worthless to the person you're talking to because it didn't 10x
Yeah.
versus something that provides not much value to the world, relatively speaking, let's say, but at least a 10x, right?
Hmm.
So I'd say just like you form your personal friend groups and your personal acquaintances, you should treat it the same way. And if that lens is about organic community growth, if that lens is about okay, what problems in the world does this solve? Does this enable a new aspect of society in ways that don't exist today? Those are the type of themes you want to attract, and the money will come, right? It's not like the ROI will come, right? But if you're focused on what's being built, right? There's a difference between focused on the effect and the cause, right?
Hmm.
So it's less about the destination, it's more about the journey, and there will be monetary gain as a result of that, but it shouldn't be the upfront focus. So that's how I filter out people, for example,
Hmm.
myself. The second thing is that there's so many different areas and so many different rabbit holes you can go down in the crypto space. It's helpful to kind of figure out what themes or what themes that you find most relevant to the success and the evolution of the overall industry. And the goal is that people kind of somehow combine passion, purpose, and skill, and you
Hmm.
focus there. And you have to trust that
Hmm.
others are doing the same in other areas of the ecosystem, right? So for me, I'm very interested in NFT infrastructure. I'm less interested in like the direct to consumer stuff, not because I don't think it's important, because it doesn't get me as excited. So this is why I like decentralized compute. This is why I like self-sovereign identity. This is why I like these things, right? Because they're infrastructurally important.
Hmm.
Not to say that the consumer stuff isn't important, right? So if you have a marketplace, for example, that's also important. But I trust that there's people that are more passionate about that, working on that. And
Hmm.
I hope those people trust that they may not know me personally, but they trust people like me are more focused on the other stuff. And we're all focused on different aspects of the supply chain to bring it all together.
Hmm. Yeah. What do you mean exactly by NFT infrastructure? What part of this is you mostly passionate about?
Yeah, so I think the compute aspect is really important. I think it's going to be a necessity. Store, for example, a lot of people complain about these NFTs that they're still like stored on AWS, for example.
Hmm.
It's one of those like things where it's like, the trilemma problem with different protocols, right? Do you care about transaction throughput? Do you care about security? Do you care about decentralization, right? And everyone's kind of vying to achieve all three of these things at one time. With NFTs and also just crypto more broadly, these identity and portable reputation will be critical.
Hmm.
Um, Storage critical,
Hmm.
um, compute critical, right? So these underpin everything we use, right? So I tend to focus on those infrastructure aspects, right? Whereas there are many solutions, most of the dApps that we use, those are consumer facing, right? It could be B2B or B2C,
Hmm.
but ultimately, though, their ability to scale and their ability to kind of like harness the call it the philosophy of decentralization is dependent on how well the infrastructure that underpins it is built and distributed.
And do you advise other collectors that while choosing what to invest in, they should look into these underpinning issues in the first instance?
I mean, it depends what kind of like actor you are in the ecosystem, right? If you're a collector that just likes to collect, different pieces, probably not. If you're a builder, probably yeah. right? So if you're building a product, yeah, I would care about these things. But if you're one that consumes the output of someone building a product, maybe you care a little bit less around it being like a necessity today versus like, okay, as we build this today, this will be a thing, 2-3 years from now. It'll be more kind of commonplace. So it depends what kind of actor you are in the space. I'd say like, a builder, an investor, different people have different roles and prioritize and weight different things proportionate to, their interest areas.
And you were saying early on about, those bad actors who potentially, could do those pump and dumps type of things. What kind of maybe Discord channels would you recommend potential collectors to get into if they, for example, if they're starting with NFTs?
Yeah, so I don't necessarily try to go after like specific Discord I'll give you an example of how my mind thinks, right? So like yesterday I picked up like I don't know if you know Knights of Degen. Are you familiar with that one? Knights of Degen. So I follow different like artists and different investors and different different groups. And I feel like a sense of belonging with some, and I feel not compatible with others. So I just basically base who I follow and which Discords I join based on my perceived compatibility from a vibe perspective. So like, Knights of Degen, they're just super cool people that are thinking of rad stuff. Like I don't even play golf, but I'm in Link style. I don't play golf, but I'm in Link style because I feel the vibe, right? I feel a sense of belonging. I feel like there's like some gnarly experimentation going on there, right? And that's what I'm attracted to. So I always just go where I feel like I'm drawn to, and I specifically, and I'm, just like everybody else, I get lost sometimes, right? I find myself in Discords because like sometimes I think like, okay, I thought this was cool and now I'm here. But like, this is clearly something I'm trying to do because I know if I commit to it, I can at least, make 10x because like I'm early, right? And those are the wrong reasons to be somewhere, right? That may work a few times, but over time, that's a losing strategy and you will fail because life has proven that. So I just try to basically keep myself accountable based on these principles. But yeah, I've been loving Knights of Degen because they just came out with what's the it just Animoca Brands and Duffy. They just invested in I forget the exact name of it, but it's not a fantasy football league. It's a league of actual players, but the plays are called by the fans. So imagine like you're in the stands. I'm like, okay, this should be a run play, guys. Let's do a run play, right? Run to the left. And then you pick it, right? So I picked up the Knights of Degen because A, I like the community there. And then B, by owning one of those, you then you get eligible to mint this new NFT that this other product is coming out. So now that's how you begin to connect your interest areas together because the flow of your NFT will provide you access to other communities that are like-minded. So you don't have to search. You'll just naturally get led there as a byproduct of teams that you trust, navigating your best interest that you can also vote on at the same time.
Wow. And it's fantastic that, finally we've got this convergence of the blockchain technology and the actual user cases, right, through NFTs and different DAOs and so on. But how far do you think we are from the mass adoption of blockchain technology, Web3 technologies?
I think there's a couple ways to answer that. If you look at it just DeFi, right? Just take DeFi, right? How big is the crypto space? It's like $1 trillion, 1.3, something like that, right? I don't know the exact number. But if you take like a institution like a Goldman or like a BlackRock, for example, they oversee 10 trillion. So one company, like let's just round down crypto to $1 trillion. And one company has 9 more trillions than the entire crypto industry, right? So like, I just imagine, right? So I think that there's a couple things that have to come into play to kind of achieve more mass adoption. One, and part of that is more money coming into the space, even though a tremendous amount of money is coming into the space. So if you look at it from a top-down perspective, a lot of these institutions to get involved need to see, they need to see what I call like rich people problems. Like you need to see more security, right? You need to see like no more wash trading, for example. You need to see these order books not be so sketchy, for example, right? You need to see certain things to have an installed trust that you can like start to divert capital that you're a custodian of on other people's behalf to it. So that's number one. Number two, I think that DeFi has reached a point where, it's just natural for certain areas of the Web2 space to get involved. So for example, anytime that you see a lot of capital deployed, but a lot of capital locked up at the same time, DeFi is just a very natural place to go to find the integrations to ease those bottlenecks. So two areas are trade finance. These are boring things to a lot of the degens, but they're real things and it's worth a lot of money. So you have trade finance, which is super complicated, super complex, that DeFi has a very clear advantage for. You have then also infrastructure, like in the US, for example, we're so bad at infrastructure. We're like, Europeans are like gods, look what they do, right? It's because it's all bottlenecked up, right? So unlocking all that infrastructure, connecting that with DeFi, enable other people to participate to getting large infrastructure across the line or medium-sized infrastructure across the line is super powerful because they have predictable returns, they have predictable schedules of that ROI being achieved. So if you build like a toll road, it's over 20 years and XYZ, right? So I see much more kind of like permeating some of these inefficient areas of capital and infrastructure in our world over here. And then the rich people problems I'm talking about, like all like the order book transparency, the wash trading, all these security aspects that will have to get basically augment in their proficiency to attract more institutional capital. So that's like that area. And then from like a bottom up approach, I think you're already seeing it, right? So I think there's a bit too much hype around play to earn. So there's a lot of crap that's coming into the space as a result, because when anyone sees like an asset class that's attracting investment, they tend to start to build towards it versus just build. It's like, oh, we were doing this and now we're doing this because this is where the capital is flowing, right? So as a result, I think you're seeing, a lot like, okay, we need to find the next Axie, for example. And as a result of that pursuit, yeah, I think you're attracting a lot of interesting, innovative folks, but then you're also attracting a lot of like speculative garbage because they know that if they put something out, they can attract capital and then figure it out, right? So I think you'll see a lot of them fail. And then the ones that are meant to succeed, form the best community, form the best game economics, create the best incentives, they'll obviously win. But as a result of that, a dollar, for example, this is why, Axie is so powerful, and I know it's not in USD, but a dollar maybe in the Philippines is transformative relative to maybe a dollar in the upscale part of Chicago, for example, which can't even get you a bottle of water. So, the economic ladder that you get to climb by participating in these, in these games and, other applications that will come out is tremendous. And it's just a natural incentive for people to join. So I think you're going to be seeing a lot more of this in emerging markets like Brazil, Colombia, a lot in Latin America, more in Southeast Asia. And then you're going to see a lot of more bottom-up participation as these people navigate into different DAOs. And then people from just the Web2 space more generally, and let's say more developed markets, naturally gravitate towards DAOs. Like, for example, not to bring it up again, but Links DAO, the coolest thing about Links DAO, it attracted just regular people that had Web2 jobs. A lot of that community is just like, I like golf. What's this? That's it. That was it. And you have people that are just like junior accountants at like Ernst & Young in there and just like, having a good time. And they'll go down rabbit holes and they'll find their way.
So you expect this bottom-up participation to happen organically, or do you think there is things to be done in order to accelerate this process?
I think it needs better tooling. It basically is the problem. So it's when people come from a kind of structured environment, these discords it's chaos. It's absolute mess. And there's some people that can go through the time it takes to see that out. Even in crypto, for example, a lot of years ago with crypto, we glorify these protocols now, but these things were nothing. All the conversations are around like how do we create the consensus model? Like that was the conversation, and then things obviously progressed, right? Different money came into space, different builders came into space, different ideas came into space, different ecosystems grew, different participants came in as a result. So I think we're just in the early stages of DAOs and the NFT space, obviously. But I think one thing that will help leapfrog its evolution is just better project management tools, better coordination tools, better platforms to synchronize, better platforms to aggregate information, better platforms to connect dots and then activate different pursuits. And then the integrations of these needs in everyday wallets, right? So for now, for example, you can vote maybe from like your MetaMask we'll need more of those integrated in platforms that are a bit more robust and fit the need of which we're trying to achieve. Because like, think about it in like the Web2 space, we have an abundance of different tools for all different purposes. Like we have tools for CRMs, like you may use Salesforce, I use Pipedrive, and this person may use HubSpot. Messaging, you may use Teams, I may use Slack, you may use, that, right? We're just not there yet with DAOs, right? So it's a lot of controlled chaos, and we leave a lot of value on the table as a result. But you need to go through this experimentation to figure out, okay, what's actually needed and how does it get deployed? So we're just where we're meant to be, basically, is my opinion.
Okay, so it seems like there is lots of gaps on the market, lots of opportunities for tools to be created.
Yeah, I mean, oh my God, it's ripe.
Right.
When there's so much to be done and there's so much coordination to happen, there's so many solutions that need to pop up to basically realize the ideals or the outcomes that DAOs and the NFT community are trying to achieve, right? And then not only that, it's, just to keep pace, right? So like obviously like in the NFT space, it's been largely, art has been like the main, you could say magnet for interest, and as a result, capital and trading and all that. But as we kind of extend ourselves now into music, for example, into fashion, into publishing, we're only increasing the verticals in which we're operating in and attracting, the people that are interested in those categories. So as a result, there's gonna be more solutions to accommodate those. Number one, from a vertical, like for example, think about it like this: if you go to an accountant and you try to essentially give them a platform or give them tools that a chiropractor needs, it'd be like, what is this? I'm an accountant. You go to a chiropractor and you try to give them tools and platforms an accountant be accustomed to using, they're going to be lost too. So music people will definitely need there'll be some base layer functionality and base layer platforms that they can all kind of like collide on, but inevitably you're going to need certain kind of like platforms and features and constructs that are suitable for verticals, whether that be marketplaces consistent with those verticals or various solutions that augment the usability of those solutions that are contextual, right? So in a music context, in a fashion context, in a publishing context, right? Just no different than marketplaces, right? We don't sell everything on eBay. It's not like we just have one thing we sell on, right? Just like we sell a lot on OpenSea today, but over time, as we expand this NFT community and the innovations that happen in it, there'll just naturally be other marketplaces that are more suitable for certain types of NFTs, and then certain layers of the NFT space.
When are we going to live in this beautiful world?
Yeah, it's evolutionary, right? So I think it doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen all at once either. So I think over time, you just see. There'll be a lot of like, some of these, the interesting part, well, to answer the question, I'd say like the span of 5 years will be like very robust to be like, whoa, this is like, we're in, we're out, we're doing this, this is crazy. Like definitely like that. But the thing people tend to forget, because we tend to glorify what's the hot thing right now. I remember like 3 years ago, EOS like raised a ton of money, they're worth a ton. And they largely haven't done anything since. And many people in this new bull cycle have caught up to them in terms of market cap, right? So I'm always kind of keen to just remember like, oh man, I felt like there was definitely excitement around certain things the last time, and it didn't pan out. So sometimes big things don't pan out, and many smaller organizations don't pan out either. So there's simply just going to be, they just won't all work out. And then the talent though, the best thing, the best thing, I'm not a big fan of Amazon. This comes from my local economy days. I think they're just very bad for the world kind of thing. But the best thing about Amazon is, the very least, a lot of talent comes out of there, right? So they have the Amazon experience, or they have the Google experience, or they have the, name it. And then they come out of that and then they create their own thing, right? So you'll see a lot of talent migrate and then migrate to maybe other organizations that are thriving, but also just create their own. So that's the kind of the beauty of it. It's a bit of a wild, wild west.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, in this beautiful vision of the world, the companies like Amazon, the companies like Uber, who rely on extraction economy, where are they going to be? Are they going to hopefully disappear, or they somehow, hybridize themselves into the new new world?
Yeah. So I think there's two paths they take, right? They go through like this M&A activity where they start acquiring these decentralized solutions, which then inevitably re-centralizes them. That's like one. But then, there's a difference between what is and what they say and the marketing behind that, the public persona and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes that's very confusing for people, like, oh, so this is decentralization, or hey, this is blockchain. And people just eat it up, right? That's number one. Number two is that they start to embrace decentralization as a model because ultimately that's where consumers are going, right? So a lot of, like, for example, a lot of the time I spent in the data economy space, there's advertisers around the world that are just like literally reinventing the wheel because their model for monetization is completely changing by law, particularly in Europe, in the EU, right? So I think that you'll find that as the attributes of decentralization elevate, more regulation, because it's in their best interest, whether they like to admit it or not. So you'll see more policy and regulation steer people, not towards decentralization, but the premise of decentralization, where then these Web2 companies will have to readjust and reacclimate their business models as a result of that, right? So I don't think they're going to feel like the pressure maybe directly from the decentralized community, but they'll feel some pressure as they see migration of users, and they'll also feel pressure from a regulatory standpoint, because it's just a natural win-win between these two groups and not for this group.
Mm-hmm. Don't you find that when it comes to regulatory issues, there should be something done about education of, governments and so on about these potential solutions?
Well, yeah, but I think a lot of that happens. The challenge is it's hard to get from education into policy, right? That's the challenge. So I don't think it's necessarily a lack of education. I think I think in the early days, it was harder to get education going because like companies were small, education's kind of like an overhead, right? So you're like spending a lot of time to educate people, then you don't really know where it's going. Government, just selling to government is essentially, it's a really long sales cycle as well. So it eats up a lot of bandwidth, a lot of resource, right? But, crypto community is a pretty gritty bunch. So I think got it done the best that could be done in the early days. But now you see a lot of different corporations, a lot of different enterprises embracing the technology or investing in the technology or deploying capital somewhere where, so now there's more of an invested interest for policy and regulation to essentially get more footing on this, right? So I think, again, it's subtle pressure coming from different angles that has all culminated into it upping on the priority level, because it's not like they weren't getting educated 4 or 5 years ago. It just wasn't a priority. And it wasn't a priority because A, not as many people were using it, B, not many people adopted it, and C, a lot of the people that they listened to from a corporate standpoint weren't using it. Mm-hmm. So I think it's just the convergence. And I think the powerful thing about NFTs, which is more powerful than crypto, is NFT has done this like interesting triangulation of converging essentially finance with technology with culture, right? So for example, like if you compared like a Joe Rogan with like, a CNN, you would argue that maybe Joe Rogan is more influential than CNN, the entire freaking network, right? And Joe Rogan, I would kind of classify, comes from like the culture category, where CNN comes from like the big media category, right? So the powerful thing about NFTs, I'm not saying Joe Rogan's involved, whatever, but I'm saying that like, NFTs have created this natural excitement and connection that people can kind of like, all kind of like sense, they can feel, right? And it's kind of bringing the culture world together with at least our form of technology world, with the financial tools that are now very much evolved and robust from DeFi all together. And that is a tough train to slow down. So that I definitely see adoption happening from that standpoint. And not only that, I see regulation stepping in to enable more of it. Because ultimately, I think if you had any country, like if you had them raise their hand, like who do they like more, like their favorite pop singer or their like, local politician? I'm pretty sure they're going to say their local, like the pop singer, right? So, I think the balance of power is shifting. The return on vote, which is a lot of how these politicians think, is and underpinned by how they're bringing forward policy or issues or innovations that people care about. And ultimately, there's just more people that care about crypto now than there were last year and the year before that. So that's only going to rise.
And when it comes to the rich people problems, is the what you said before, like whether this technology is actually ready for the big, companies to jump on it. Do you think the technology is ready, or they're just kind of too scared of it?
I think it's more ready than it was in previous years. So I think that there are, I think when you think about it from a protocol perspective, not many of them put out roadmaps. Did you notice that? Like, it's not like they're coming out with like massive roadmaps like Solana and Near and, Cosmos. It's all up to the ecosystem now, right? So from like a base layer technology, it's quite ready, right? And yeah, there are certain kind of compromises. I think that the problem isn't less. I don't think the question is like, is it ready? I think it's more about like what trade-off is more important to whom and for what reason, right? So it's less a technology question and more of a trade-off question. And that trade-off is really inherent in the type of organization you are and what you're trying to achieve, right? So if it's a bank, ultimately it's security at all costs, right? But then it's like, well, I can't use it if the transactions are expensive and slow. So you're stuck in this situation, right? So I think that the timeline to get to a level of consumer ready production is much more compressed than it was many years ago, right? So that's why I would say, in the aggregate, I would say yes to the question. Mm-hmm. But it's not even needed. Like it's like you don't necessarily need to push it on them; they'll be pulled in.
Mm-hmm. Faris, you're doing such a great job in explaining the Web3 technologies and actually making it really accessible, I think. If you had an opportunity to meet like any 5 people in the world and like sit with them for the whole day and explain them, all these possibilities, what kind of people would they be? Would they be like country leaders? Would they be like CEOs of the top tech companies or spiritual leaders?
Okay, interesting question. I have to think that through. I wouldn't meet with world leaders. Not interested. Because a lot of like, here's my experience, and I'll give you some context why I say that. It's not like, screw that. It's more so when I was working on that product I was telling you about with cities, a mayor, outside of a few, like Mayor Suarez in Miami is a total gangster, like he's doing amazing things, but by and large, a lot of mayors are like more about vision. Mm-hmm. Right? They're more like, so when these innovations that are unproven, right? I'm not saying all the innovations are unproven, but if some things are unproven, they can be excited about it. But then ultimately those decisions, they get passed down to people that could care less about vision, mm-hmm. right? And that layer is very cumbersome. It's very bureaucratic. It's very budget driven. It's very everything you don't want to hear, right? And it's a pain in the ass. So I think world leaders is just exactly like that construct, but even bigger. So and it depends who you are. If you're like a large team, then maybe because you would have the resources. But as a small team, no. I wouldn't spend time on world leaders. Maybe I would spend time, however,
advisors or some other people within the governments.
This is true, but it wouldn't be my top priority. I guess if I was thinking about it, I would probably try to approach the people that are most resistant first. Because it's easy to talk to people that are like already kind of, drinking the same Kool-Aid. It's tough to talk to people that are on the fringes of what you believe. And once you better understand why they're on the fringes of what you believe, then you can bring them on a journey to get a little less, ease up a little less, get a little softer towards what you're trying to achieve. So like a Warren Buffett, for example, obviously doesn't like crypto because he loves dollars because he has a ton of them, right? And he's old school. He's old and he's old school, right? So I'd probably talk with him and his team at Berkshire.
Okay, yeah. So Warren Buffett number 1. 4 other people. Who else would you have in the room with you?
I would probably talk with. I'd talk with Tom Brady. I'd be like, Tom, why'd you do it? How can you do it more? And what are you doing after your career? So I would definitely I would talk to him.
Who is he? Can you remind me?
Oh, I love that you don't know who Tom Brady is. Tom Brady's the quarterback for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and he's like now you call him like this one of the spokesperson people for FTX.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah. I would say that I would also okay, I'll go back to world leader. I would talk to like a former world leader. I talked to Barack Obama.
Oh yeah.
Obama has, and I wouldn't talk to him because he's just Obama. I would talk to him. He's probably the best that's ever done it at galvanizing communities. He's the best. No one's done what he's done, right? And he speaks from the heart, right?
Mm.
And so I talked to him, seeing how we can learn from his ways of cultivating and gathering and organizing communities in a way that is relevant for the decentralized space. So he'd be my third. I would talk to. I would go to Brazil and I would talk to the leader of a favela,
Oh,
right?
wow.
Because yeah, because then the reason I say that is because like a lot of the time people in these like extremely poor um situations that all have phones and all have now access.
Have you been to a favela?
Um I've been to no, I haven't been to favela necessarily, but I don't know a lot of research on Brazil. I've been fascinated with it. Unfortunately, COVID hit, so I couldn't go. But I know a lot of interesting like impact market. If you know them, they're in the Selo ecosystem. They're doing a lot of great work in Brazil.
Wow.
So that's like a product to check out. They're doing great things. And the reason I would do that though is because what I discovered, and this is existing like the homeland, Jordan, when you're in these like poor on the maybe not quite middle class but definitely in the lower tier of things economically speaking, a, you have a phone, that means b, you have access, and c, that means a little goes a long way and you're a massive contributor to the space, right? But you largely take direction from one centralized source typically, right? It's quite tribal. So I just try to understand how that thinking is, how these people would need to understand things to then talk about it with others, to encourage others, and for lack of better words, get people to adopt. Because if they say yes, then everyone else says yes. So it's not about going 1 to 1. It's about going 1 to 1,000, 1 to 5,000, 1 to 10,000, and that's the type of power that they have on a local level. And this is what I learned, many years ago when I was doing that product. And I entered the co-op space. A lot of the best people that have done the most on a community level, they're unknown. You don't know their name. Their name's not Elon Musk. You have no clue who these people are, but they exist and they're very prominent on a very localized level. They just don't do enough to make the papers. They're not big on Twitter, but they do more than most people you've ever met in your life. And they're very known where they are. In fact, I was talking to my wife. She watches the show. I don't even know the name. Like Queer Eye or something like that, on Netflix. I don't know the exact name of the show. It's a famous show now. But I was like, and I'm walking by as she's watching it, and I'm like, it's interesting. This guy, like, what's up with him? He's like very unkept, and everyone else is really like, very kept. It's like, yeah. She's like, that's the point. She's like, what's the point? It's like, yeah, they pick someone in their community that is like a leader that could use help. So it's actually voted on. So like they pick a guy that could use the help of this group, right? So he's very known where he is, but he's largely unknown everywhere else. So those are the people you want to get to meet. And that's how adoption happens.
And on the favela note as well, I think it would be very good to put the drug distribution on blockchain as well, and perhaps this way, it actually, drug production and consumption could actually work.
This is true. This is true. And so that's who I would talk to, and then I would talk to. I need to think that through a little bit more. I don't want to just pick someone to pick someone.
Okay,
I'll stick with those for now.
Maybe we can put it when you figure out who would be the fifth person, we can perhaps put it in the description of the YouTube video.
Deal.
Right? Yeah, but aside from that, like talking about 2022, we're at the beginning of the year. What are you excited about? What do you think 2022 is going to bring for you?
Yeah, so I think it's going to bring a few things. I definitely see like a DAO getting created. I see like more experimentation happening. I think it's gonna be a very creative year. So like this pickleball thing is super cool, but there'll be other versions of that. And just meeting like-minded folks and just creating things from scratch. Probably a high failure rate, but a few successes in there. So I'm excited about that. I'm seeing much more of a transition to more full-time investing. I love the sourcing different different innovations, being on a ground level in the community, what's being built, what's not being built. And there's nothing quite like meeting a founder with a big vision, but like seeing it before no one else sees it. It's a bit of a rush. So looking forward to that. And then the reason I'm also wanting to get more full-time, I guess, focus more of my time on venture is that, I work with a lot of projects that have, taken in a lot of money, from private investors that are known, and then B, public sale through community. They tend to have the same problems, right? They may be doing different things, but they tend to have two primary problems. One is resourcing, right? They're like, damn, we need like X amount of developers. We need a marketing person. Like, because the interesting thing about the NFT space, which is quite new, and I'm even still adjusting, is it typically was that you have a technical led team, and they're lacking the business resources to kind of complete the picture of how they, make the product and the market fit. Or you have like a more kind of like visionary business, leadership, and they're trying to like understand the technology and where to build and why and all that. And then now what I'm finding is that you have creative leadership. So it's a creative, like designers, creative, which is a bit interesting because they have a bit of both. They have a bit of business and a bit of technical. And they need basically some support of rounding those skills out to make the solution robust enough to then achieve the growth that they're, which is their objective. So that's number one. And then number two, I would say that they need a lot of help right off the bat with forming win-wins within the community, and they can't do it quick enough, right? And this is just a matter of time and capital, right? So I think there's a lot of value that can be done in terms of supporting, the capital layer with more value add services, because typically these VCs get ranked on two things: diamond hands and value add services. So what can you hold the token when you say, if you believe in us, can you believe in us enough to hold the thing and not dump on us? Number one. And number two, what can you bring outside of capital, right? Because if, my dollar and your dollar may not be created equal in terms of how important you can be from a skill set, from a network perspective, from a, from all those kind of different kind of like variables. That's why dollars aren't created equal, or money is not created equal. Like, what can you do in terms of value add to help us on our journey after you give us the dollar? So that's kind of how I'm kind of steering myself this year.
Exciting times ahead.
Try.
You promised, Faris, that you're going to tell us an anecdote, some story about yourself, that's which is not necessarily related to what you're doing, but it's quite interesting, and online community does not know yet about. There was something about Peru, or
you like the Peru one? Okay. I mean, I've had a fun life, honestly. Like, I've done. I've snuck into the biggest sporting events and gotten on the field many times. Like, for example, like people are like, what? But the Peru one stands out to me because it's like, damn, I got to get resourceful, and I got to get resourceful quick. So basically what happened is, like I was telling you, like, I used to be part of this like bit of like a underground community of like, credit card maximizers. So we used to apply for a bunch of credit cards, meet the minimum spends, and then take all the points and then go everywhere first class and stay at the best hotels and stuff like that. And so basically I was doing that, and I booked an around the world trip with the first stop being Peru. So I flew from like, I think DC, where I was living at the time, to LA, and then LA to Lima. And the problem was that I only had like $80 in my pocket. I went out the night before DC, spent like $20 or something, and so I had 80. And then I landed, and then I'm like, oh, I got to get cash out for the taxi and stuff, a hotel and things like that. So I ate my card. So I only had $80. So I was like, shh, like, what am I gonna do here? So, and the hotel was like, I don't forget what it was, like 150. So I'm like, okay, what am I gonna do? So I go to the hotel. I'm like, look, here's my situation, right? $80, right? So basically, I make it with a deal for, and I can't give you all the 80. I tell them, because I need to also buy my Machu Picchu ticket, which is $60, right? So I only have 20. So basically, what I did is for $20, I cleaned the whole place. So I did all the bed sheets, I cleaned it, I mopped it, I worked all night, I did everything, right? So I worked my way through it. Didn't have enough for food, so I'm starving at this point. So the next morning, I go out with my $60 and I buy the Machu Picchu ticket. The only thing I have is my ticket to Cusco, which is in the valley, which is what you do when you want to get to Machu Picchu. So I'm like, okay. So what I did was, I'm like, and now I'm flying first class at least because I was using my points. So what I did was, I emptied my whole backpack. I only kept like one article of clothing because I had to create enough room. And I went to the first class lounge and I took all the food, all the oranges, all the Inca Colas, everything, right? And I filled it up, right? So I have this backpack full of food. I get on the flight. I land in Cusco. I have no money for a taxi. So I pay for everything using the food, right? So then I got there. So then I'm like, hey, I get to this hostel. It was a hostel I was staying at. I'm like, hey, I got no money, but I have a card. No card allowed. You need to come up with cash somehow. So the next day, I have to meet the card in Western Union, but still go to Machu Picchu in the same day. I'm like, I can do this. So I go, basically wake up the next morning. I find the same taxi driver. I pay him again. He takes me to Ollantaytambo, which is where I'm catching the train. So in Ollantaytambo, to pay for the hotel there, basically what I did is I took, this is like now like 8 years ago.
Okay.
I had to catch this, like, I forget what it's called, but it's called like a minibus. They have a name for it, to get it from Cusco to Ollantaytambo. So basically I'm like, the whole bag, I think the whole bag of food, right? I'm like, damn. Not only that, since I didn't have enough money, even what the food was worth, I had to carry this massive birthday cake. So I didn't get to see anything. I had this massive birthday cake that blocked my entire face because it was holding for this little girl. It was a birthday in Ollantaytambo. So literally for 3 hours, I'm like hugging a cake. Right? That's my whole job, right? And it can't move. It's not covered either. It's like the icing, the frosting, and all that. Like I'm like, okay, I got to keep this thing steady. So get in Ollantaytambo. I tell the hostel, I'm like, hey, I have no money. He's like, we're going to help you. So I'm like, okay, I do have a card though, but it just wasn't being taken anywhere. So I announced to the group, I'm like, tell you what, if anyone lets me take them out to dinner in the one restaurant in town that takes credit card, I'll buy you the dinner, right? And then I'll buy you, I'll buy you the dinner, right? So only one guy raises his hand, right? And I'm like, hey, you just give me the cash, right? One guy. So I take the guy out to dinner, right? And so I know him to this day. He was a bartender in Salt Lake City. He was there biking on the salt caves. So I buy him a steak dinner. The problem was that the coolest thing about Peru is that everything's cheap. The bad thing for me is that everything was cheap. So I only got enough for the hostel there. So got to Machu Picchu, couldn't afford the bus to get up Machu Picchu. So I had to hike my way up. And then I also had to hike my way down, right? Everyone else just took the bus. And it's like, the roads are like this, right? So I got like buses like coming by me, right? But I know I need to get to Western Union back in Cusco on $0. Luckily, I found the same taxi driver that drove me from the train station in Cusco to the hostel in Cusco. And he said that if I got someone like paying people, 2 other paying people to come in the taxi, he would drive me for free. So I found this couple from Spain. They hopped in. In return for what they were doing, I told them I would take their pictures and all the spots they wanted to stop as long as they got me back to Cusco by 5 p.m. I got to the Western Union by 4:50, grabbed $1,000, boom, paid for everything.
Wow, this story is a great advertisement for sharing economy and DeFi finance, right? I think we should kind of go to the animation or short film, and it should be perhaps just little teaser for all the activities you're doing.
It was a wild time. I got the call from my sister on Machu Picchu. Hey, money's been sent to Western Union. I'm like, I gotta go, and then boom, got out of there.
Wow, fantastic! Thank you for sharing that. That's an amazing story.
No problem. No problem.
I think we're slowly running out of time. I was wondering if you want to say or add anything else apart from what we were talking about.
No, I mean, yeah, not really. I just think it's been a fun conversation. I'm just like anyone else, right? I'm excited to see where things go, particularly with the NFT space and how these projects come to life and how they execute on their roadmaps and how can more communities come in. So I think, I've been in the space for a long time now, but I'm just as curious as if it was my first day.
Great. Thank you so much, Faris. It's been a very exciting conversation, and thank you for everyone for tuning in. If you want to come to the next Tokenverse series, please tune in the same day, same time next week. And thank you so much, everyone. See you next week. Bye-bye.